Nobody expected it. No forecast was made, no siren blared. The sky gave no warning, and yet, in an instant, everything changed. It was an ordinary morning in Dallas. People were heading to work, children were walking to school, and the sky, though grayish, seemed to merely herald another rainy day. But then, the impossible happened. A sound tore through the heavens, not a thunderclap, but an ancient roar, deep, vibrant, as if the very firmament were screaming. The clouds spiraled apart, and from them emerged something many would never forget. A flaming tornado, wreathed in shadows and fire, spinning like a portal to the abyss. News networks were overwhelmed. Unprecedented catastrophe in the southern United States. Atmospheric phenomenon or supernatural event? What is happening to the planet? Headlines tried to capture the horror, but no words sufficed. Cities like Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, and Phoenix were overtaken by a sky that didn't darken. It vanished. A living shadow blanketed the streets, and then came the color. Not the gray of storms, nor the blue of skies, but a deep red, spilled like blood across the earth. People stopped on sidewalks. Workers dropped their tools. Children silenced their laughter. All gazed upward at a sky that seemed to breathe. And then, silence fell. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of oppression. A silence that choked the soul. And in the midst of that anguished stillness, a sound arose, a cosmic lament, an ancient groan that lasted exactly 3 minutes, but felt like an eternity. It wasn't wind, it wasn't machinery, it was something that vibrated in the bones, that touched the spirit, something not of this world. Then, as if that lament had awakened a restrained fury, the waters rose. Towering walls of liquid surged where no rivers existed. The city of Houston was swallowed by an ocean that didn't come from the sky. There was no rain, there was no storm, but there was destruction. In less than 4 hours, entire neighborhoods were submerged. Houses floated like paper. People screamed from rooftops, begging for help that would never come. Authorities were in shock. No weather system had detected any anomaly. No tool had predicted the collapse. It was as if nature had disconnected from its own rules. And then came the second sign. The sky, still stained scarlet, began to glow. But it wasn't the glow of the sun. It was lights dancing above the clouds, intelligent lights. Turquoise, pulsing gold, sparkling violets. They snaked like living beings, as if they were watching. No radar traced their origin. No telescope could decipher them. Astronomers collapsed under the weight of no answers. "This isn't physical," one scientist said on national television. "This is intentional." And that's when the questions began. Not in newspapers, not at conferences, but in hearts. What is happening? What forces are at play? And above all, what are they trying to tell us? If you feel there's something beyond what's shown, if you too heard the heavens cry out, if you want answers, then subscribe. Here we don't look away. We stare straight into the abyss, and its name is truth. While the nation still counted its dead and rescued survivors from the inexplicable floods, a new blow struck the heart of America. A presidential helicopter crashed in Washington, D.C. All 67 occupants died. President Trump himself confirmed personally. There were no survivors, no apparent cause, no technical failure identified. The aircraft simply fell from the sky like a stone. And then, a pattern began to emerge. 2 days later, a medical jet crashed in Philadelphia, killing all crew and passengers, including a child and her mother. 3 days later, a commercial plane vanished over Alaska. No wreckage, no signal, only silence. The sky was no longer a refuge. It was a battlefield. And as if the heavens were at war, the earth responded. California began to burn. The wildfires, already common in the region, morphed into aberrations. Flames rose like towers, dancing pyres against the night sky. But what terrified most were reports of supernatural phenomena. Blue fireballs floating among the trees, whirlwinds of flame defying the wind, and sounds that didn't come from the fires, but from something alive within them. Some firefighters began refusing shifts. "There's something wrong with that fire," one said. "It watches us." While the West Coast burned, the East Coast froze. Florida, Georgia, Alabama, all blanketed by inexplicable blizzards. Roads vanished under ice. Power grids collapsed. But it wasn't the cold that scared people most. It was the sound, a metallic wail echoing beneath the ground. People said they felt the earth tremble, and amid the snow, figures appeared. Dark silhouettes, walking without leaving footprints, vanishing when anyone drew near. The country was under siege, but not by a human enemy, by something older, something that used the elements to speak, yet no one wanted to listen. That's when the heavens opened, not metaphorically, but literally. In Oklahoma, during a cold and silent dawn, a light formed high above. It wasn't the glow of a satellite or the beam of a plane. It was something ethereal. And then, everyone awake at that hour heard it. The sound. It was like a tear in reality. A trumpet that didn't sound metallic but spiritual. A lament from another dimension. The vibration pierced walls, passed through bodies, reached the core of people. Dogs began to howl. Trees stopped swaying. Time seemed to freeze. Mary Thompson, a local resident, described it. It was as if the sky itself were weeping, but not out of sadness. It was as if it were warning us, desperately. Soon after, the impossible happened. In the sky above Oklahoma, a figure appeared, a radiant silhouette. Many fell to their knees. Others wept. Some couldn't even look. It was Jesus Christ. Not as a sculpture, not as a subjective vision, but there, visible, surrounded by lights and celestial beings. Robert Hastings, an elderly man from the area, could barely hold back tears as he recounted what he saw. I was too old to expect miracles, but I saw the impossible. I saw the sky open, and the Son of Man reveal himself. Social media exploded. Videos, photos, audio recordings. The government tried to control the information. Mainstream media went silent, but it was too late. Hundreds of thousands had witnessed it, and nothing would ever be the same. The next day, atmospheric disturbances began. A dense fog blanketed entire cities, but it wasn't ordinary fog. It defied natural laws. It appeared without warning. It blocked visibility in seconds. It carried metallic odors, and sometimes the sound. That sound. The same trumpet that had rung out in Oklahoma. And with the fog came the drones. Silent, triangular, black as night. They hovered over urban centers, military installations, schools. They were filmed, reported, but no one claimed them. No government admitted to controlling them. They were just there, watching. After them came the symbols. Yes, the symbols. First in the skies, through weather patterns forming geometric images on meteorological radars. Then in the fields, as marks left on the ground, impossible to be made by human hands. And finally, in the waters. At Myrtle Beach, after an abnormally red tide, the sand was stained scarlet. Scientists claimed it was algae, but the locals knew. It wasn't algae, it was blood, it was judgment, it was a sign. It was in this context that, in the Middle East, conflicts erupted. Israel, Gaza, Iran, the region ignited. Missiles streaked across the sky like arrows of the apocalypse. Children wept beneath rubble. The entire world held its breath. And then, at the height of the conflict, another vision. This time, over Jerusalem. During a partial solar eclipse that coincided with the festival of Purim, a cross of light appeared in the sky, visible for only a few minutes. But it was enough. Many broke into sobs. Others ran in despair. It was as if the veil between heaven and earth had been torn completely. The scientific community tried to explain it as an optical phenomenon, an atmospheric reflection, but no one could account for the synchronicity. An eclipse, a prophetic festival, a cross. And soon after, a chain of earthquakes across the region. The prophecy was alive. It was being written before the world's eyes. Yet still, many remained spiritually asleep. It was at this moment that his name resurfaced. Trump. After the air disaster, rumors began to swirl. Was he truly dead? Or was he hidden, awaiting a future revelation? Theories spread like wildfire, and some, more bizarre, claimed his death was a sacrifice, a ritual, part of something greater, part of something prophesied. Meanwhile, the United States faced an unprecedented wave of disasters. Submerged cities, burning forests, out-of-season blizzards, blood-red skies, and animals. Animals gone mad. Birds migrating in endless circles. Whales beaching in droves. Cattle frozen, staring at the sky as if hearing something humans couldn't perceive. And then, another sign. In Alaska, security cameras at a research base captured an immense light streaking across the sky. It wasn't a meteor. It wasn't human technology. It was something alive, intelligent. It changed direction, and it vanished with a deafening boom. Then came electrical system failures, satellites veering out of orbit, military communications silenced for hours. The official explanation? None. Just silence. And in that silence, pastors began to speak. Spiritual leaders from various parts of the world started reporting visions, messages, vivid dreams of fire, destruction, and a voice saying, "Prepare, the time is up." Sarah Delroy, a pastor in Houston, was one of the first to declare publicly, "We're not facing natural disasters. We're facing the beginning of judgment. The sky is screaming. God is speaking. But who is listening?" Meanwhile, the people remained divided. Some mocked. Others awoke. But most stayed inert, complacent, apathetic. And time, as always, marched on. The blood moon would appear again. That's what the prophet said. Another blood moon was approaching. This time, it promised to be the most intense in decades. And it coincided with another biblical date, the Feast of Trumpets. Coincidence or prophetic alignment? Mary Thompson, the same woman who first heard the sound in Oklahoma, had another dream. In it, she saw waters parting like the Red Sea. But on the other side, there was no dry land. There was fire, a sea of fire, and a multitude trying to decide whether to cross or turn back. She woke screaming, "The time is up. Choose now." And perhaps that is indeed the message. There's no more time to delay decisions. No more room for lukewarm faith. Everything around us, the sky, the earth, the animals, the signs, is crying out for attention. We stand at the threshold of a global revelation, a point of no return. The third trumpet sounded, not in the skies, but in the spirit of those who could hear. Those spiritually awake began to notice an undeniable pattern. The catastrophes, the signs in the heavens, the inexplicable sounds, the disappearances. Everything seemed to point to a plan, a cosmic script. And within that script, a figure began to emerge from the shadows. He was not yet known, had no name or face, but he was already acting, already influencing, already distorting the world around him. The Bible calls him the son of perdition. Others call him the Antichrist. On the global stage, events began to move in his direction. Laws were quietly passed, restricting religious freedom. Christian imagery was removed from schools. Social media began censoring content with biblical messages, all in the name of tolerance. But what was truly being tolerated was lies, and what was being silenced was truth. At the same time, a new public figure emerged. A charismatic leader, young, a peacemaker, a millionaire, tech-savvy. His words seemed to unite all sides. His rhetoric was irresistible. He preached unity, science, peace, but utterly rejected all forms of moral absolutes. And this man, before the world's cameras during a conference on the future of humanity, declared, "The world's problem is dogmatic religion. The future needs a new paradigm, a new man, a new faith, a new order." Millions applauded. Few discerned. And then, another sign. During a live UN broadcast, an aurora borealis appeared above the building in New York City, where such a phenomenon should never occur. It was beautiful, green, golden, purple. But soon, amid the dancing lights, something took shape. An eye. A flaming eye. It appeared for less than 5 seconds, but it was enough. The image spread. It was captured by dozens of cell phones. And then, it vanished from every device. Transmission error, they said. But those who saw it would never forget. That same night, the largest earthquake in 50 years struck Japan. 30,000 dead. And inexplicably, a sacred lake turned red. On its banks, an ancient inscription appeared. indecipherable, but those who saw it felt something, a spiritual weight, an urgency. The world was crumbling, not just geographically, but morally. Chaos was no longer the exception, it was becoming the rule. Civil wars erupted. Brothers turned against brothers. Fear gripped cities. And still, few recognized the root of the problem. Sarah Delroy kept preaching. Her church was vandalized twice, but she didn't stop. "What we're facing isn't political, it's spiritual," she shouted from the pulpit. "This is war for souls. The kingdom of darkness is revealing itself, and many are still asleep." Meanwhile, in the sky, the signs intensified. Balls of light began appearing over the Mediterranean Sea. Dozens of them. They moved in complex formations, like a visual language. Satellites tried to capture them but failed. Militaries observed but denied. The prophets, however, knew. They were signs. They were sentinels. And once again, Trump's name resurfaced. But now, with a new theory. That he wasn't dead, but in hiding, awaiting the right moment. A moment when the world would beg for strong leadership, for someone to take back control. And many began to believe he would return, but not as before. That something in him had changed. That, perhaps, he was no longer the same. The boldest said, "He'll return, but not as a liberator. He'll return as judgment." And then, as if the heavens themselves confirmed, another blood moon appeared, the darkest ever recorded, the most intense, accompanied by a partial solar eclipse and a geomagnetic storm that disrupted communications in 14 countries. The scriptures were clear. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. Joel 2:31. Yet still, the world remained blind. In the Nevada desert, an entire community vanished. About 430 people disappeared during the night. They left food on tables, cars in garages, phones charging. No trace, no noise, no witnesses, only a sound captured by a security camera. The same trumpet, the same celestial lament, the same echo of the apocalypse. And in Oregon's forests, trees began falling for no reason, as if something invisible were toppling them with force. Thermal cameras detected intense heat rising from the ground, but geologists said there was no magma. So what was it? Some said portals were opening, others that hell was rising. But everyone felt something was coming. Mary Thompson had one final dream. In it, the sea receded, as if preparing for a new flood. But it wasn't water rising from the abyss. It was smoke, black, living smoke with eyes, and from its midst emerged a figure dressed in white, but with a face cloaked in shadows. He walked on the waters, and around him the nations knelt, offering everything, their children, their freedoms, their souls. She woke screaming and wrote in her diary, "I saw the Antichrist, and he was worshipped." By now, the world was no longer the same. Truth was no longer clear. Right and wrong had been swapped. Chaos was no longer an interruption. It was the new normal. And still, God continued to speak, to warn, to extend his hand. Robert Hastings, in his final interview, said, "No matter what comes, no matter how dark it gets, I saw the light, I saw the King, and I know he'll return, not to destroy, but to redeem." He died the next day, in his sleep, at peace. While nations scrambled to contain the chaos and institutions tried to maintain a facade of control, ordinary people began to awaken. Thousands gathered in squares, fields, even deserts to pray, cry out, and seek answers. There was no more trust in science, governments, or media. People wanted to hear something real, something from heaven. Spontaneous movements of repentance began to emerge. In Atlanta, a group of youths abandoned phones and social media and started fasting. In Phoenix, abandoned churches were reopened. In Dallas, an open-air service drew over 20,000 people, and there, under the reddened sky, they prayed for mercy. Sarah Delroy was there. She climbed onto a wooden crate and with a Bible in hand shouted, "You're waiting for the final judgment as if it's far off. But it's already begun. It's here, among us. The sky is speaking. The Spirit is crying out. But are we listening?" That same week, The stars began to change. Astronomers warned. Entire constellations were shifting. Planetary orbits were subtly adjusting, but it was visible. Creation was being moved, reconfigured, as if the universe itself were about to witness something unprecedented. And against this cosmic backdrop, a sound returned. This time louder, clearer. It came from the depths of the earth, from within the oceans, from the heights of the mountains. It was the sound of trumpets, but now with a second tone, a drum, like a divine heartbeat, as if heaven were preparing to descend. Meanwhile, reports of apparitions grew, no longer just visions. Now there were interactions. People claimed to have been touched by lights. Others saw angelic figures in moments of despair, vanishing without a trace. Testimonies multiplied, sudden healings, voices calling by name, inexplicable deliverances. But not all apparitions came from the light. In some cities, dark figures began to be seen, shadows with red eyes, forms that cast no shadow, but absorbed the light around them. They appeared at night, especially in abandoned places, and they brought a supernatural cold. Many began reporting similar dreams, a staircase descending into endless darkness, and voices saying, "Choose, now." And the animals continued to act strangely. In Nebraska, cows refused food and stood in circles, staring at the sky. In Montana, horses crowded at the edges of farms, as if trying to flee something invisible. Dogs barked at the void. Birds crashed into windows en masse. Something had broken. The barrier between the natural and the supernatural was dissolving. The veil between worlds was being torn. Then came the marked. People across the country began reporting mysterious marks appearing on their bodies during sleep. Marks shaped like crosses, stars, or even eyes. Some glowed for a few seconds before fading. Others remained. Science tried to explain them as allergic reactions, inflammations, or even psychological phenomena. But those affected knew it was something spiritual. And once again Trump appeared, not in the flesh, but in holograms. Old speeches of his began circulating on hidden networks, re-edited with ominous messages. Some said he would be resurrected, others that he had never died. Conspiracy theories began claiming he was the key to something greater, to the opening of the fourth seal. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the Euphrates River continued to dry up. The phenomenon had begun subtly years ago, but now it was undeniable. The riverbed revealed ancient ruins, skeletons, forgotten temples, and on the stones, inscriptions in languages even linguists couldn't translate. But one word was repeated: awakening. In Israel, religious leaders began to fall silent. Something had profoundly shaken them. Some vanished from the media. Others were seen weeping at Jerusalem's walls, saying nothing. The temple's high priest no longer gave interviews, and rumors of celestial apparitions within the Temple Mount began to circulate. Everything seemed to converge. Every region of the world was feeling it. All of creation was reacting. That's when, finally, a broadcast shocked the world. During a live total eclipse streamed from Patagonia, thousands watched the sun's occlusion. But as the shadow covered the solar disk, a figure emerged at its center, a cross of light, clear, impossible to explain as lens flare or reflection. It remained visible for exactly 77 seconds. Then it vanished. At that moment, a simultaneous power failure struck 5 world capitals: Washington, London, Rome, Moscow, Tel Aviv. The world plunged into darkness, if only momentarily. And when the light returned, signs began appearing in the skies. Not just shooting stars or auroras, but words, shapes. Some resembled celestial alphabets, others ancient symbols. By now, even the most skeptical began to admit, something is happening. Sarah Delroy gathered her congregation one last time, not in a church, but in an open field. There, beneath the shifting stars, she said, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning of the end. What's coming cannot be avoided, but it can be overcome. Not with weapons, but with faith. Not with politics, but with bended knees. We stand on the threshold of the greatest prophecy in history, the return of the King." And then, the winds began to blow differently. It was as if the atmosphere itself were transforming. The air grew dense, the sky's colors deepened, the sense of time distorted. Mary Thompson, in her final diary entry, wrote, "I heard the sound again today, but this time it was different. It wasn't a warning. It was an announcement, as if the sky were saying, 'He is coming.'" The world stopped. Not officially. Cities still pulsed. Cars still crossed roads. Markets still opened their doors. But something invisible had changed. People looked at one another with restless eyes. Everyone knew, even without admitting. There was a weight in the air, a whisper in the collective spirit. Something was approaching, something inevitable. Then came the final night. In Oklahoma, the sky opened once more. Not with thunder, nor with lights, but with silence. A silence that descended like a veil over the earth. Mary Thompson felt it. She stepped outside, looked up, and saw the firmament. Still, frozen. No stars, no clouds, just a cosmic void. Suddenly, a flash sliced through the sky, without sound, without wind, without warning. A halo of light formed over the city's center. Within it, the same figure many had seen weeks before, Christ. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, a host. Thousands of radiant beings. Some wept, others fell face down. The entire city poured into the streets. And then he spoke. No one heard with their ears, but everyone understood. Every person, in every corner of that place, received the message, not in words, but in spirit. The hour has come. Those words vibrated in the marrow of bones. They touched the soul, and in the blink of an eye, the sky darkened completely. An earthquake struck the southern states, but not like the ones before. This was deep, different, as if the earth itself were being split in two. Lakes dried in seconds. Mountains trembled. But amid the chaos, those who had listened stood firm. Sarah Delroy, with arms raised in worship, smiled through tears. She knew. This was the fulfillment. This was the promise. And then the final sign appeared. The moon, once red as blood, now shone like gold. An incandescent glow, reflecting not destruction, but redemption. It was as if the sky were saying, "Justice is coming. Glory is near." At this moment, Robert Hastings appeared in a final recording, found by his family days after his death. In it, he said, "When all seems lost, look to the sky. And when the sky seems closed, look within. For the King is closer than ever, and those who wait for him will never be put to shame." That message echoed across the internet. It touched millions. It sparked a new movement. People began to pray, families reconciled, churches filled. And even in the face of new disasters, plagues, persecutions, and darker signs, a flame kindled in the hearts of the remnant. Now, it was no longer fear. It was faith, a burning faith. A faith that didn't ask for deliverance, but for strength to endure. A faith that looked at chaos and said, "Even if the heavens quake and the earth splits, I will trust." And that faith is what will mark those who stand on the day of the final revelation. The world will never be the same, but those who heard the signs, saw the heavens, and discerned the time are already preparing. Not to survive the apocalypse, but to witness the glory of God when it is revealed to all nations. You heard the signs, you saw the heavens. Now, the choice is yours. If you feel this message spoke to you, don't ignore it. This channel is a space for warning, discernment, and spiritual preparation. Subscribe, turn on notifications, share this message. Be part of those who do not sleep, because what is coming is greater than anything we've ever lived through. And when the final trumpet sounds, you need to be ready.